November 3, 1943. Tierpitzufer Complex, Berlin. The morning fog rolled off the Landwehr Canal as Hauptmann Werner Dietrich stepped through the heavy oak doors of the Kriegsmarine Intelligence Analysis section. In his leather briefcase, wrapped in waterproof canvas, lay documents that would shatter every assumption German command had maintained about Allied industrial capacity. Convoy HX-229's complete manifests. 217 pages of cargo lists, sailing schedules, and production codes captured intact from a torpedoed Allied merchant vessel northeast of Iceland. Werner had spent 17 years analyzing enemy shipping data, from the Baltic trade routes of the Great War to the Mediterranean campaigns of 1942. His reputation for mathematical precision had earned him the nickname the Accountant among his colleagues, a title he wore with quiet pride. But nothing in his professional experience had prepared him for what he'd discovered in those manifests during 3 sleepless nights of preliminary analysis at the Naval Archives in Wilhelmshaven. The numbers refused to make sense. They violated every intelligence estimate the Reich had produced about American industrial capability since 1939. The Convoy designation itself carried significance that troubled Werner's methodical mind. HX-229, Halifax to Liverpool Convoy series. 229 separate Atlantic crossings since the war began. Each convoy averaged 40 to 60 merchant vessels. The mathematical implications suggested Allied merchant marine capacity that exceeded German estimates by orders of magnitude. But the cargo manifests revealed something far more devastating than mere shipping volume. They documented industrial output that transformed the entire strategic calculus of the war. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Werner's office occupied a corner of the 3rd floor, positioned to overlook the canal's grey waters and the ministry buildings beyond. The space reflected his personality, orderly, functional. Every intelligence report filed chronologically, every production estimate cross-referenced with multiple sources, every assumption tested against observable evidence. His colleagues joked that Werner trusted mathematics more than orders from high command, a dangerous reputation in 1943 Berlin, but one that had kept his analyses accurate when ideological certainty clouded judgment. The manifests lay spread across his desk like accusations. Ship number 41 from the Convoy, SS Robert Peary. Liberty ship, hull number MCE 514. Built by the Permanente Metals Corporation, yard number 2, Richmond, California. Cargo. 7,000 tons of military equipment, but it was the construction date that stopped Werner's careful reading. Launched September 30th, 1942, exactly 33 months after the ship had been ordered. The Permanente Metals Corporation had assembled a 10,000-ton cargo vessel, complete with engines, armaments, and full maritime certification, in less than 5 weeks. Werner checked his calculations again. 5 weeks. German shipyards required 8 to 10 months to produce comparable merchant tonnage, assuming steel availability and skilled labor pools remained stable. The disparity suggested either catastrophic German intelligence failure or American propaganda designed to demoralize enemy analysts. Werner's professional instinct rejected both conclusions. The manifest contained too much mundane detail, technical specifications and cargo weights to be sophisticated disinformation, and German intelligence had proven generally accurate about Allied capabilities throughout the war, if occasionally conservative in estimates. Fregattenkapitän Hans Müller arrived precisely at 0800 hours, his routine punctuality marking decades of naval service. The senior intelligence officer's career had spanned both world wars, from submarine operations in 1917 through the current Atlantic campaign. His weathered face carried the particular exhaustion of someone who'd watched too many accurate intelligence assessments ignored by superiors convinced of ideological certainties. The relationship between Werner and Müller had developed into something approaching genuine intellectual partnership, rare in the increasingly politicized atmosphere of wartime Berlin. "You requested urgent meeting, Dietrich," Müller said, removing his peaked cap and settling into the wooden chair opposite Werner's desk. His tone carried professional curiosity rather than bureaucratic impatience. Your message mentioned Convoy manifests that require immediate senior review. Werner gestured toward the documents spread across his workspace, their official Allied stamps and shipping codes clearly visible. The HX-229 materials arrived from Wilhelmshaven yesterday evening, Herr Fregattenkapitän. U-boat recovery operation, captured from the SS Daniel Webster after torpedo strike on October 18th. The Convoy Commodore's vessel. Complete shipping manifests for all 61 merchant ships in the formation. Muller leaned forward, his interest sharpening. Complete convoy manifests represented intelligence prizes of exceptional value. German naval intelligence typically relied on scattered observations, wireless intercepts, and prisoner interrogations to reconstruct Allied shipping patterns. Comprehensive documentation of an entire convoy's composition, routing, and cargo provided the kind of systematic intelligence that validated or challenged fundamental strategic assumptions. Preliminary assessment? Muller asked, though Werner's troubled expression had already communicated the essential conclusion. Herr Fregattenkapitän, the production figures documented in these manifests contradict every estimate we've maintained about American industrial capacity, Werner replied, choosing his words with the precision that had defined his analytical career. If these documents are authentic, and I believe they are, then our strategic calculations regarding Allied material sustainability are fundamentally flawed. The statement hung between them like smoke from burning cities. Strategic calculations, material sustainability, professional euphemisms for the brutal mathematics that determined whether Germany could outlast Allied industrial production in a war of attrition. Werner had spent years calculating those equations, balancing German submarine effectiveness against Allied shipbuilding capacity, weighing Wehrmacht operational requirements against available resources. Every analysis had suggested that if Germany could sink merchant tonnage faster than America could replace it, the Atlantic lifeline would strangle Britain into a negotiated settlement. Muller studied the manifests with the systematic attention of someone trained to identify deception. He checked watermark patterns, verified stamp configurations, compared typewriter fonts against known Allied administrative standards. After 15 minutes of careful examination, he looked up with visible concern. These appear authentic, Dietrich. Allied document production uses specific paper stocks that are difficult to counterfeit, and the mundane details, cargo weights, ballast calculations, crew assignments, these suggest actual shipping operations rather than propaganda construction. Werner nodded, grateful for Muller's confirmation, even as it deepened his professional dread. The Liberty Ship Program, Herr Fregattenkapitän. According to these manifests, the Americans are producing standardized cargo vessels at unprecedented rates, multiple shipyards, identical designs, assembly line construction methods. The SS Robert Peary represents not exceptional achievement, but typical production output. He pulled a specific document from the pile, a cargo manifest annotated with Allied shipping codes. This vessel, the SS John W. Brown, lists construction time of 56 days from keel laying to launch, built by Bethlehem Fairfield Shipyards in Baltimore. The manifest notes this as slower than average production pace due to worker training requirements. Werner's voice carried the flat precision of someone reporting mathematical facts that challenged comfortable assumptions. Slower than average, Herr Fregattenkapitän. 56 days is their below-average performance. Muller absorbed this information with the grim recognition of someone whose worst professional fears were being confirmed through documented evidence. Production rates of this magnitude suggest shipbuilding capacity exceeding our most pessimistic intelligence estimates by factors of 4 or 5. If America can produce merchant tonnage at these speeds, our submarine campaign cannot achieve strategic effectiveness, regardless of tactical success. The conclusion represented professional heresy in 1943 Berlin, where Gross Admiral Dönitz's U-boat force remained central to German strategic planning. The Atlantic campaign had consumed enormous resources, sophisticated Type 7 and Type 9 submarines, extensive naval infrastructure, tens of thousands of highly trained crew members, all premised on the assumption that German submarines could sink Allied merchant vessels faster than American shipyards could replace them. If that fundamental equation had been wrong from the beginning, then years of naval operations had been spent pursuing unachievable strategic objectives. Werner turned to another section of the manifests, pages detailing specific cargo contents. The material shipments themselves, Herr Fregattenkapitän, present equally troubling intelligence. Individual vessels carrying cargo volumes that suggest industrial output far exceeding our calculated American capacity. He indicated a manifest page marked with red pencil annotations. The SS Stephen Hopkins, sunk by German raiders in September of '42, according to our records. This manifest lists her sister ship's typical cargoes: 7,000 tons of mixed military equipment per vessel, tanks, artillery pieces, aircraft components, ammunition. Muller studied the cargo listings with growing professional alarm. The numbers told a story that intelligence analysts had been trained to recognize but hoped never to see. Industrial mobilization on a scale that transformed strategic calculations. How many Liberty ships do these manifests suggest the Americans have produced, Dietrich? Werner consulted his preliminary calculations, pages of mathematical analysis completed during his sleepless nights at Wilhelmshaven. Based on hull numbers visible in the Convoy manifests, combined with German intelligence regarding Allied naming conventions and production schedules, I estimate a minimum of 500 Liberty ships completed by September of '43, with production rates appearing to accelerate throughout '43 based on declining hull number gaps. 500 ships. Muller felt the number's weight settle into his understanding like ballast water into a damaged hull. German naval intelligence had estimated American merchant construction at perhaps 200 vessels annually, assuming conventional shipbuilding methods and realistic industrial capacity. 500 ships in less than 2 years suggested production infrastructure that exceeded peacetime German estimates of total American shipbuilding capacity. The convoy cycle itself presents additional intelligence concerns, Werner continued, his analytical momentum carrying him through data that each sentence made more devastating. HX2, 29. The convoy numbering system suggests 229 separate Halifax to Liverpool crossings since the series began. Atlantic convoys typically sail every 8 to 10 days according to our observation records. This aligns with 229 crossings over approximately 4 years of war. He pulled another document, a German intelligence summary of Allied convoy routes compiled from U-boat observations and wireless intercepts. But the HX series represents only one of multiple parallel convoy routes. We also monitor SC convoys from Sydney, Nova Scotia, ON and ONS convoys westbound from Britain, plus Mediterranean routes, Pacific operations, Arctic convoys to the Soviet Union. The total merchant vessel count required to sustain this convoy network exceeds our intelligence estimates by factors we haven't adequately calculated. Muller absorbed these revelations with the grim professionalism of someone trained to identify strategic reality, regardless of ideological preferences. His career had provided enough experience with institutional denial to recognize the patterns. Intelligence assessments were ignored because they contradicted comfortable assumptions. Accurate analyses dismissed as defeatist. Mathematical reality is subordinated to wishful thinking, disguised as strategic confidence. The cargo composition, Muller said, returning to the manifest details with systematic attention. What does this reveal about American industrial mobilization? Werner had anticipated this question and had spent considerable analysis time examining the cargo patterns visible across the convoy's merchant vessels. The manifests document extraordinary industrial coordination, Herr Fregattenkapitän, mixed cargoes suggesting centralized production planning. One vessel carries tank components manufactured in Detroit alongside aircraft engines from Connecticut and artillery shells from Pennsylvania. The logistical integration required to assemble such cargoes implies industrial organization far more sophisticated than our estimates suggested. He indicated specific manifest entries, cargo descriptions annotated with Allied production codes. Each tank listed includes manufacturer designation and production batch number. The M4 Sherman tanks in this convoy, 47 vehicles total across multiple ships, come from 4 different manufacturers. Chrysler Corporation, Fisher Body Division of General Motors, Ford Motor Company, Pacific Car and Foundry Company. 4 separate production facilities manufacturing identical vehicles to standardized specifications. The implications troubled Müller's strategic understanding. German tank production remained concentrated in specialized facilities, each producing slightly different variants of Panzer designs based on local manufacturing capabilities and component availability. The idea of 4 separate automotive manufacturers producing identical military vehicles suggested industrial standardization that exceeded German peacetime production methods, much less wartime adaptation. Standardized production on this scale requires extensive industrial infrastructure, Müller observed, his professional experience recognizing patterns that suggested systematic national mobilization, interchangeable parts, common tooling specifications, centralized quality control. This isn't merely increased output, it's a fundamental transformation of industrial philosophy. Werner nodded, grateful that Müller understood the deeper implications visible in the cargo manifests. The automotive industry conversion, Herr Fregattenkapitän. America has apparently transformed its entire civilian automobile manufacturing capacity into military production infrastructure. The manifests list vehicle production by Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, companies we knew as civilian manufacturers. They're now producing tanks, aircraft engines, and military trucks using assembly line methods developed for peacetime automobile production. He consulted his notes, calculations regarding American automotive industry capacity compiled from pre-war German commercial intelligence. In 1941, American automobile manufacturers produced more than 3 million civilian vehicles. The conversion of this production capacity to military equipment suggests potential output that exceeds our strategic planning assumptions by orders of magnitude. The morning light had strengthened outside Werner's windows, illuminating the grey waters of the Landwehr Canal and the government buildings beyond. Berlin moved through its wartime routine, trams carrying workers to munitions factories, ministry officials hurrying between meetings, the visible machinery of national mobilization that had become familiar after 4 years of total war. But inside Werner's office, the careful documentation of Allied industrial capacity suggested that German mobilization efforts, however extensive, remained insufficient to match American production volume. Müller stood and walked to the windows, his reflection ghost-like against the morning vista. These manifests require presentation to senior command, Dietrich, Admiral Dönitz, possibly General Admiral Raeder, if he maintains influence. The strategic implications affect the entire Atlantic campaign. His voice carried the weariness of someone anticipating institutional resistance to uncomfortable intelligence. But we must document our analysis with exceptional thoroughness. Senior officers will question conclusions that challenge fundamental strategic assumptions. Werner understood the warning implicit in Müller's statement. Intelligence analysts who reported unwelcome facts risked professional consequences in an increasingly ideological command structure. The Reich's leadership valued confidence over accuracy, certainty over doubt, reassuring assessments over troubling analysis. Werner had watched colleagues transferred to unimportant posts, or worse, after submitting reports that contradicted official optimism. But his professional integrity demanded honest assessment of evidence, regardless of political consequences. "I'll prepare comprehensive analysis, Herr Fregattenkapitän," Werner replied, his commitment to thorough documentation overriding concerns about career implications. Mathematical calculations regarding Allied shipbuilding capacity, industrial output projections based on documented production rates, strategic assessment of submarine campaign effectiveness against replacement construction volumes. Müller turned from the windows, his expression carrying a mixture of professional respect and genuine concern. "Be careful with your language, Dietrich. Frame conclusions as intelligence observations requiring further investigation rather than definitive strategic assessments." Give the senior command room to consider implications without feeling their judgment is being directly challenged. The advice reflected decades of bureaucratic experience, understanding how to present uncomfortable truths to superiors invested in existing policies. Werner appreciated Muller's concern even as he recognized the fundamental dishonesty of softening conclusions for political palatability. Mathematics didn't care about institutional sensitivity. Industrial production either exceeded strategic assumptions or it didn't. Allied shipbuilding capacity either threatened German Atlantic strategy or it didn't. Werner's professional responsibility required clear presentation of evidence, regardless of how senior officers might respond. "I understand, Herr Fregattenkapitän," Werner said, though his tone suggested he would prioritize accuracy over diplomatic presentation. "The analysis will document observable facts and their strategic implications. How the senior command responds to this intelligence remains beyond my authority." After Muller departed, Werner returned to the manifest with renewed focus. The documents represented fragments of a larger picture, glimpses into Allied industrial mobilization that suggested systematic advantages German intelligence had failed to adequately recognize. Each cargo list, each production code, each shipping schedule provided data points that, when analyzed comprehensively, revealed strategic reality that challenged comfortable assumptions about eventual German victory. He began with basic calculations. Convoy HX 229, 61 merchant vessels, average cargo capacity 7,000 tons based on Liberty ship standard design. Total cargo, approximately 427,000 tons of military equipment, fuel, and supplies delivered to Britain in single convoy crossing. 10-day convoy cycle suggested by Allied operational patterns. 43 convoys annually on the HX route alone. Total annual cargo capacity on a single convoy route, over 18 million tons. But the HX series represented only one of multiple parallel convoy routes documented in German intelligence files. Werner pulled additional reports, U-boat observation logs, and wireless intercepts that provided fragmentary evidence of Allied shipping operations. SC convoys from Sydney, on convoys westbound from Liverpool, Mediterranean supply routes, Arctic convoys to Murmansk, Pacific operations supporting American campaigns against Japan. Each convoy route represented additional merchant vessel requirements, additional industrial output, additional evidence of American capacity that exceeded German strategic calculations. He worked through the afternoon, his analysis building a systematic picture of Allied industrial mobilization visible through the lens of convoy manifest data. The numbers accumulated with devastating consistency. American shipyards produce multiple Liberty ships weekly. Automotive manufacturers convert civilian production capacity to military output. Centralized industrial planning coordinating production across continental geography. The fundamental transformation of the peacetime economy into total war mobilization on scale that German planners had dismissed as American propaganda. By evening, Werner had compiled a preliminary assessment that documented the strategic crisis with mathematical precision. If American industrial output matched the capacity suggested by convoy manifest analysis, then the German submarine campaign could not achieve decisive strategic effect, regardless of tactical improvements. Allied merchant tonnage construction exceeded German sinking capacity by margins that rendered the Atlantic battle unwinnable through attrition alone. The analysis represented a professional conclusion Werner had hoped never to reach. His career had been built on the belief that accurate intelligence provided the foundation for effective strategy, that careful observation of enemy capabilities allowed realistic assessment of German prospects. But the convoy manifests documented reality that no amount of tactical excellence could overcome. Industrial capacity determined strategic outcomes when conventional military factors remained roughly balanced, and American industrial capacity, as revealed through detailed cargo documentation, exceeded German production by factors that transformed the war's fundamental mathematics. Werner stared at his calculations as darkness settled over Berlin, the city's blackout regulations obscuring the government district in protective shadow. Somewhere out in the Atlantic darkness, German submarines hunted Allied convoys with professional skill and terrible courage. Young men, barely older than Werner's own son, risked death in cramped steel cylinders to sink merchant vessels delivering American cargo to Britain. The submarine crews fought with tactical excellence that German naval tradition demanded, achieving local victories that High Command celebrated as proof of strategic progress. But the manifests on Werner's desk told a different story. Each U-boat success, each merchant vessel sent to the bottom, represented temporary tactical achievement against strategic impossibility. American shipyards replaced sunken tonnage faster than German submarines could sink it. The industrial balance had already tipped beyond recovery, transformed by production methods that German economic planners had failed to anticipate or adequately counter. Werner understood with crystalline clarity that his analysis would change nothing. Senior command would receive his report with institutional skepticism, would question his calculations, would demand additional verification before accepting conclusions that challenged fundamental strategic assumptions. And even if they accepted his intelligence assessment, even if Admiral Dönitz acknowledged that American industrial capacity exceeded German ability to counter through submarine warfare alone, what strategic alternatives existed? Germany had committed to the Atlantic campaign with enormous resources and institutional momentum. The U-boat force represented decades of naval development, billions of marks in infrastructure investment, complex logistical networks supporting submarine operations from French Atlantic ports. Abandoning this strategy based on intelligence analysis would require admission of strategic failure on scale that High Command seemed institutionally incapable of acknowledging. The manifests remained spread across his desk like archaeological evidence of a civilization whose capabilities had been systematically underestimated. Werner had spent his career analyzing enemy industrial capacity, had prided himself on mathematical accuracy, uncompromised by ideological preferences. But even his skepticism regarding official optimism had proven insufficiently pessimistic. The reality of American industrial mobilization exceeded his calculations by margins that suggested fundamental German intelligence failure extending back years. He thought about Hans, his 19-year-old son serving aboard U-347 somewhere in the Atlantic darkness. The boy had joined the submarine service with the eager confidence of youth raised on stories of German naval excellence. Hans believed, as Werner once had, that superior training and technological sophistication could overcome material disadvantages. That individual excellence mattered more than industrial volume. That courage and skill provided an advantage against mere numbers. But the Convoy manifests a different story, one that Werner's paternal love wished he could shield Hans from understanding. The Atlantic battle had already been decided by factors beyond individual heroism or tactical competence. American shipyards had won the strategic contest before German submarines could achieve decisive effect. Hans and his crew mates would continue fighting with all the skill and courage German naval tradition demanded, would achieve tactical victories that garnered medals and celebration. But their sacrifice would change nothing about the war's ultimate mathematics. Werner carefully collected the manifests and his preliminary analysis, securing them in the leather briefcase for tomorrow's presentation to senior intelligence staff. The documents weighed almost nothing, a few kilograms of paper and mathematical calculation, but they carried implications that seemed to crush the air from his office, making breathing feel like pushing against atmospheric pressure that increased beyond human tolerance. Outside his windows, Berlin settled into its wartime night routine. Searchlights occasionally swept the cloud cover, looking for RAF bombers that might penetrate the city's air defenses. The distant rumble of flak batteries suggested aerial activity somewhere over the government district, though the all-clear sirens had not sounded. Werner had grown accustomed to these nocturnal disruptions, the background noise of a capital at war, fighting an enemy whose industrial capacity he was only now beginning to truly comprehend. He thought about the Allied sailors manning those merchant vessels, documented in the Convoy manifests. Young men, much like Hans, following orders, trusting their leaders, believing in the righteousness of their cause. They sailed, knowing German submarines hunted them through Atlantic darkness, that death could arrive with torpedo strike and brutal drowning in icy water. Their courage matched anything German submarine crews demonstrated, their sacrifice equally profound, despite fighting for causes Werner had been trained to oppose. The war had become a contest between industrial systems rather than merely military forces. American production methods, assembly line efficiency, standardized components, centralized planning, had proven more decisive than German technical sophistication or tactical excellence. Detroit's automotive engineers had contributed more to Allied victory than generals commanding armies or admirals directing fleets. The transformation of American industrial capacity into military output had occurred with speed that surprised even optimistic Allied planners, according to captured documents Werner had analyzed over recent months. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Werner locked his office and walked through the darkened corridors of the Tierpitzufer complex, his footsteps echoing in the administrative silence. The building housed hundreds of intelligence analysts, each examining fragments of information about Allied capabilities, each contributing to Germany's understanding of the enemy it fought. But Werner wondered how many of his colleagues recognized the strategic reality visible in their cumulative analyses. How many had assembled enough puzzle pieces to see the complete picture that individual reports only hinted at? The November night carried a bite of approaching winter as Werner emerged onto the Tiergartenstrasse. He walked toward his apartment in Charlottenburg, preferring movement through cold darkness to waiting for unreliable trams. The physical activity helped process his thoughts, gave his restless mind something mechanical to focus on while deeper understanding settled into professional consciousness. Tomorrow he will present his analysis to senior intelligence staff, would document American industrial capacity with mathematical precision, would explain why the Atlantic submarine campaign could not achieve strategic objectives regardless of tactical improvements, and senior officers would listen with varying degrees of attention and skepticism, would ask questions designed to find flaws in his calculations, and would ultimately file his report alongside hundreds of other intelligence assessments that challenged comfortable strategic assumptions. Werner understood that institutional momentum carried its own terrible logic. Germany would continue prosecuting the Atlantic campaign because abandoning it required admission of failure too profound for High Command to acknowledge. U-boats would continue hunting convoys through winter darkness, young men would continue dying in submarines and merchant vessels, and American shipyards would continue producing Liberty ships at rates that made German tactical victories strategically irrelevant. The manifests in his briefcase documented this reality with bureaucratic precision. But documentation changed nothing about the mathematics that determined outcomes. Werner had spent his career believing that accurate intelligence provided the foundation for effective strategy. But what happened when intelligence revealed that strategy itself had become impossible? When mathematics demonstrated that the war's fundamental equations could not be solved in Germany's favor, regardless of tactical excellence or strategic adjustment? These were questions that extended beyond Werner's analytical authority, that challenged assumptions he lacked institutional position to address. His responsibility ended with accurate assessment of enemy capabilities. What the senior command chose to do with that assessment remained beyond his influence. Werner could only document truth as revealed through careful analysis of captured documents and hope that somewhere in the Reich's command structure, someone possessed courage to acknowledge strategic reality and act accordingly. But as he walked through blacked-out Berlin, surrounded by evidence of national mobilization and popular sacrifice, Werner suspected that institutional courage had become as scarce as strategic alternatives. Germany would fight on because fighting was all that remained, would continue campaigns that mathematics had already decided, would sacrifice additional generations of young men to strategic impossibilities that professional pride prevented High Command from acknowledging. The Convoy manifests had revealed a truth that Werner wished he could unlearn, knowledge that made his professional life feel like elaborate exercise in documenting predetermined defeat, but his integrity demanded he continue the work regardless of its futility. Continue analyzing enemy capabilities with mathematical precision. Continue presenting uncomfortable intelligence to superiors invested in comfortable illusions. Continue fulfilling responsibilities of accurate assessment even when accuracy itself seemed to serve no strategic purpose. Werner reached his apartment building as midnight approached, climbing familiar stairs to rooms that felt simultaneously safe and confining. His wife Emma slept peacefully, exhausted by her own war work at the district rationing office. Werner envied her ability to find rest, wished his mind could be quiet enough to allow a similar escape from consciousness and its burdens. He sat at his kitchen table with a cup of ersatz coffee, the bitter chicory substitute reminding him of all the genuine things the war had taken. The manifests remained in his briefcase and would remain there until tomorrow's presentation, but their implications had already settled into his understanding and had already transformed his professional worldview in ways that could not be reversed. Somewhere in the Atlantic darkness, Hans served aboard U-347, trusting German technical excellence and his own training to provide advantage against Allied merchant convoys. Werner wished he could warn his son that individual excellence mattered less than industrial volume in this new kind of warfare, that courage and skill, however profound, could not overcome the mathematical inevitability documented in American cargo manifests and production schedules. But such warnings would serve no purpose except to burden Hans with knowledge that changed nothing about his circumstances or duties. Better that the boy maintain faith in German capabilities, continue fighting with confidence that his sacrifice contributed to achievable strategic objectives. Werner would carry the burden of accurate understanding alone, would document the mathematics of defeat while his son fought battles that statistics had already decided. The November night deepened toward dawn. Berlin slept uneasily under its protective darkness, and Werner sat with his terrible knowledge, waiting for morning light that would require him to present intelligence that no one wished to hear and everyone needed to understand. The briefing room in the Tierpitzufer complex smelled of cigarette smoke and institutional anxiety. Werner arrived early on November 4th, carrying his briefcase with the careful reverence of someone transporting evidence of institutional failure. The room's oak paneling and formal portraits of German naval heroes seemed to mock the uncomfortable truths Werner would present. Fregattenkapitän Möller had arranged attendance by senior intelligence officers who possessed both technical competence and sufficient rank to ensure Werner's findings reached appropriate command levels. Kapitän zur See Friedrich Hoffmann arrived precisely at 0900 hours, his staff officer carrying additional convoy intelligence files that suggested preparation for serious analytical discussion. Hoffmann commanded the Naval Intelligence Analysis Division, responsible for coordinating intelligence assessments across multiple operational theaters. His reputation for professional skepticism and analytical rigor had survived years of institutional pressure toward ideological conformity. Werner had worked with Hoffmann on previous assessments and respected the senior officer's commitment to accurate intelligence regardless of political convenience. Korvettenkapitän Ernst Weber followed, representing Admiral Dönitz's submarine warfare staff. Weber's presence signaled that U-boat command recognized the convoy manifests as potentially significant intelligence requiring senior attention. The junior officer's weathered features suggested extensive sea service before his current staff assignment. Werner appreciated that Dönitz had sent someone with operational experience rather than a purely administrative officer disconnected from battlefield realities. "Gentlemen," Möller began formally, establishing the briefing's serious tone. "Hauptmann Dietrich has completed preliminary analysis of captured convoy documents that present significant intelligence regarding Allied industrial capacity and Atlantic shipping operations. His findings require careful consideration as they challenge certain assumptions regarding enemy capabilities." Werner approached the presentation board, where he'd mounted enlarged sections of the convoy manifest alongside his mathematical calculations. The visual display documented American industrial output with clinical precision that eliminated subjective interpretation. Numbers told stories that ideology couldn't distort, assuming senior officers possessed courage to accept mathematical reality. The Convoy HX-229 manifests document 61 merchant vessels delivering approximately 427,000 tons of cargo to Britain. Werner began, his voice carrying the flat precision of someone presenting scientific findings. Individual ship construction data reveals American shipbuilding capacity significantly exceeding our intelligence estimates. He indicated the manifest entry for the SS Robert Peary, its construction timeline circled in red pencil. Liberty ship production timelines average 33 to 56 days from keel laying to launch. Multiple shipyards producing identical vessels using standardized components and assembly line methods. The manifests suggest a minimum 500 Liberty ships completed by September of 1943, with production rates accelerating throughout the year. Hoffman leaned forward, studying the documents with professional attention that suggested genuine interest rather than diplomatic courtesy. 500 vessels represents production capacity exceeding our estimates by factors of 2 to 3. What verification exists for these construction timelines? Werner had anticipated this question and had prepared documentation that supported his calculations through multiple independent sources. The manifests contain hull numbers following sequential patterns, Herr Kapitän, cross-referenced with German intelligence regarding Allied naming conventions and captured prisoner interrogations. Additionally, the technical specifications, welding patterns, component standardization align with mass production methods rather than traditional shipbuilding techniques. He pulled another document, U-boat observation reports compiled from Atlantic patrol logs. Our submarine commanders report encountering increasing numbers of Liberty ships throughout 1943. Their observations confirm accelerating American merchant vessel deployment consistent with production rates documented in these manifests. Weber spoke for the first time, his tone carrying the professional concern of someone recognizing tactical implications. If American shipyards produce 500 merchant vessels annually, our submarine campaign cannot achieve decisive strategic effect. Even with improved U-boat production and tactical success, we cannot sink tonnage faster than Allied replacement construction. The statement articulated what Werner's analysis had documented, but senior officers had seemed reluctant to acknowledge. German submarine warfare strategy rested on the fundamental assumption that U-boats could destroy merchant tonnage faster than Allied shipyards could replace losses. If that assumption proved false, then the entire Atlantic campaign became an elaborate exercise in tactical achievement without strategic purpose. The cargo composition presents equally significant intelligence, Werner continued, indicating manifest sections detailing specific equipment shipments. The Convoy transports 7,000 tons of military equipment per vessel, Sherman tanks from 4 different manufacturers, aircraft engines from multiple production facilities, artillery components, ammunition, vehicles, all documented with manufacturer codes and production batch numbers. Hoffman studied the cargo listings with visible concern. Multiple manufacturers producing identical military equipment suggests industrial standardization beyond our assessed American capabilities. German production typically maintains manufacturer-specific variants due to component availability and facility capabilities. Werner nodded, grateful that Hoffman understood the implications visible in the manifest details. The automotive industry conversion, Herr Kapitän. American civilian manufacturers, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, have apparently transformed their peacetime production capacity into military output. The manifests document tanks produced by automobile factories using assembly line methods developed for civilian vehicle manufacturing. He consulted his calculations, pages of mathematical analysis regarding American industrial capacity. Pre-war American automobile production exceeded 3 million vehicles annually. If even partial conversion of this capacity produces military equipment at comparable rates, American industrial output exceeds German production by orders of magnitude that fundamentally alter strategic calculations. The room fell silent as senior officers processed implications that challenged comfortable assumptions about eventual German victory. Werner had presented mathematical evidence documenting American industrial superiority, but mathematics couldn't overcome institutional investment in existing strategies or political pressure to maintain confidence in German capabilities. Weber finally spoke, his operational experience providing context that pure intelligence analysis sometimes missed. Our submarine crews report increasing Allied air coverage throughout 1943, extended-range aircraft, escort carriers providing continuous air support. If American industrial capacity matches these production figures, they can simultaneously build merchant vessels and expand aerial anti-submarine assets. Werner had compiled data supporting Weber's observation. The manifests document aircraft production alongside merchant shipping. B-24 Liberator bombers built at Ford's Willow Run facility. Production rates suggest one aircraft completed every 63 minutes. Annual output potentially exceeds 20,000 aircraft from a single manufacturing complex. The numbers seemed impossible, violating everything German intelligence had assessed about American industrial limitations. But the manifests provided documentary evidence that couldn't be dismissed as propaganda or wishful thinking. American industrial democracy had achieved production rates that German precision manufacturing couldn't match, despite theoretical sophistication and technical expertise. Hoffmann requested specific documentation, examining manifest pages with the systematic attention of someone searching for analytical flaws. After 15 minutes of careful review, he looked up with visible professional concern. "These documents appear authentic, Dietrich. The mundane details, crew manifests, cargo weights, ballast calculations, suggest actual shipping operations rather than deception material. What strategic assessment do your findings support?" Werner had dreaded this moment, when mathematical analysis required translation into strategic conclusions that challenged institutional assumptions. If American industrial capacity matches documented production rates, Herr Kapitän, then German strategic calculations regarding Atlantic campaign effectiveness require fundamental revision. Allied shipbuilding exceeds our submarine sinking capacity by margins that render tonnage warfare strategy unachievable. The statement represented professional assessment. Werner's integrity demanded, but his caution was recognized as potentially career-ending. Senior officers didn't advance by presenting intelligence that challenged fundamental strategic doctrines or suggested years of military operations had pursued impossible objectives. But Werner's responsibility required honest analysis regardless of political consequences. Müller intervened with diplomatic precision that acknowledged uncomfortable truths while preserving institutional dignity. Hauptmann Dietrich's analysis documents significant intelligence regarding enemy capabilities. His findings require presentation to Admiral Dönitz and Senior Naval Command for strategic assessment. The Convoy manifest provides documentary evidence that German intelligence estimates may require revision based on observable Allied production achievements. Hoffmann nodded slowly, recognizing Möller's careful language that conveyed essential information without directly challenging existing policies. "I will arrange a briefing with the Admiral's staff, Fregattenkapitän. This intelligence warrants senior attention, despite its uncomfortable implications for current strategic planning." The meeting continued through the afternoon, as Werner presented additional analysis regarding convoy routing, patterns, Allied coordination systems, and merchant vessel deployment cycles. Each data point reinforced the fundamental conclusion that American industrial mobilization exceeded German capacity to counter through submarine warfare alone. The Atlantic campaign had become mathematically unwinnable, regardless of tactical improvements or operational innovations. As senior officers departed, Werner felt the familiar weight of professional responsibility without institutional power to affect policy. He documented strategic reality with mathematical precision, but documentation changed nothing about Germany's commitment to submarine warfare or institutional resistance to acknowledging uncomfortable truths. The Reich would continue prosecuting the Atlantic campaign because admitting failure required courage senior command seemed to lack. Werner returned to his office as evening darkness settled over Berlin. The Convoy manifests remained spread across his desk, documentary evidence of American industrial achievement that transformed strategic calculations. Each page represented another data point supporting conclusions Werner wished he could ignore, but his professional integrity demanded he continue the work regardless of its futility. The December cold bit through Werner's overcoat as he approached the Reich Chancellery on December 15th. Admiral Dönitz had requested a personal briefing regarding the convoy intelligence, suggesting the findings had reached the highest levels of naval command. Werner carried his comprehensive analysis, pages of mathematical calculations and strategic assessments that documented American industrial superiority with scientific precision. The Admiral's office reflected naval tradition and professional competence. Charts covered the walls detailing U-boat operational areas, Atlantic convoy routes, and sinking statistics that documented the submarine campaign's tactical achievements. Dönitz himself projected confidence and determination that had sustained German submarine operations through years of increasingly difficult conditions. But Werner noticed the subtle signs of professional concern, the tightness around the Admiral's eyes, the careful attention to intelligence reports scattered across his desk. Hauptmann Dietrich, Dönitz began without preamble, gesturing toward a chair positioned precisely before his desk. Kapitän Hoffmann presented your analysis regarding captured convoy documents, extraordinary claims regarding American shipbuilding capacity and industrial production. I wish to hear your assessment directly. Werner opened his briefcase, withdrawing the convoy manifests and his supporting analysis. Herr Großadmiral, the documents captured from Convoy HX-229 provide comprehensive intelligence regarding Allied merchant shipping operations and American industrial mobilization. The evidence suggests production capacity significantly exceeding our previous intelligence estimates. He spread the key manifest pages before Dönitz, indicating construction timelines and cargo specifications. Liberty ship production averages 33 to 56 days from keel to launch. Multiple shipyards producing identical vessels using standardized components. The manifests document a minimum 500 Liberty ships completed by September of 43, with accelerating production throughout the year. Dönitz studied the documents with professional attention that Werner found encouraging. The Admiral had built his reputation on operational competence rather than ideological posturing, might possess courage to acknowledge intelligence that challenged comfortable assumptions. These construction timelines seem improbable. Hauptmann. German shipbuilding requires 8 to 10 months for comparable merchant tonnage. American claims of 5-week construction suggest either exceptional capability or propaganda designed to demoralize enemy analysts. Werner had prepared for this skepticism and had compiled multiple independent sources supporting his calculations. The manifests contain extensive technical detail, Herr Großadmiral, hull numbers, manufacturer codes, cargo weights, crew manifests. This level of mundane specificity suggests actual shipping operations rather than sophisticated deception. Additionally, our U-boat commanders report encountering increasing numbers of Liberty ships throughout 43, confirming accelerating American merchant vessel deployment. He pulled Weber's operational reports, submarine observations documenting the growing Allied merchant fleet. The tactical evidence supports the documentary intelligence, Herr Großadmiral. Our submarine crews face increasing numbers of merchant vessels, despite successful sinking operations. The replacement rate exceeds our ability to achieve strategic attrition. Dönitz absorbed this information with visible professional concern. His career had been built on submarine warfare doctrine, on the belief that U-boats could strangle Britain through merchant tonnage destruction. Intelligence suggesting this strategy had become mathematically impossible challenged his life's work and institutional identity. The cargo specifications, Dönitz said, returning to the manifest details. What do these reveal about American military production capacity? Werner indicated the equipment listings, cargo descriptions documenting industrial output. Multiple manufacturers producing identical military equipment, Herr Großadmiral, Sherman tanks from 4 separate facilities, aircraft engines from automotive companies. The industrial coordination suggests centralized production planning and capacity that exceeds German manufacturing by significant margins. He consulted his calculations regarding American automobile industry conversion. Pre-war American civilian vehicle production exceeded 3 million units annually. The automotive manufacturers, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, have apparently transformed this capacity into military equipment production. If they achieve comparable output rates with military goods, American industrial volume overwhelms German production regardless of individual equipment quality. The strategic implications hung between them like fog over cold water. Dönitz had spent years developing submarine tactics, improving U-boat designs, coordinating Wolfpack operations that achieved tactical excellence. But all this professional competence meant nothing if the fundamental strategic equation, sinking tonnage faster than enemy replacement, had become mathematically impossible. "What production figures do your calculations suggest, Hauptmann?" Dönitz asked, his tone carrying the flat precision of someone preparing to confront uncomfortable truth. Werner had compiled comprehensive estimates based on manifest analysis and industrial capacity assessments. American aircraft production potentially approached 8,000 units monthly by late 43, Herr Großadmiral. Tank production exceeded 2,000 units monthly. Naval construction, including merchant vessels, warships, and auxiliary craft, suggesting total tonnage that replaces all our sinking operations with capacity remaining for fleet expansion. The numbers seemed fantastic, violating every assumption about industrial possibility that German economic planning had maintained. But Werner's analysis drew from documentary evidence and mathematical calculation rather than ideological preference or wishful assessment. American democracy had mobilized industrial capacity that German centralized planning couldn't match, despite theoretical advantages of authoritarian coordination. Dönitz sat silently for a long moment, processing intelligence that challenged his strategic worldview. Werner respected the admiral's professional integrity, his willingness to consider uncomfortable evidence rather than dismissing findings that contradicted existing policies. This was an officer committed to winning the war rather than preserving institutional dignity or personal reputation. "The implications for our Atlantic strategy," Dönitz finally said, "require careful consideration beyond immediate operational adjustments. If American production capacity matches your documented findings, Hauptmann, then the fundamental premises of our submarine campaign, tonnage attrition, strategic isolation of Britain, become questionable regardless of tactical improvements." Werner nodded, grateful that Dönitz understood the strategic crisis his analysis revealed. "The mathematical reality, Herr Großadmiral, suggests we cannot sink merchant tonnage faster than American shipyards replace losses. Even with improved U-boat production and tactical innovations, the industrial balance favors Allied replacement capacity by margins that render tonnage warfare strategy unachievable." The admission represented a professional conclusion Werner had resisted throughout his analysis. But mathematical honesty demanded acknowledgement that German submarine operations, however tactically successful, pursued strategically impossible objectives. The Atlantic campaign had become an elaborate exercise in tactical achievement without decisive strategic purpose. Dönitz stood and walked to the wall charts detailing U-boat operational areas and sinking statistics. "Our crews achieved tactical excellence, Hauptmann. Wolfpack coordination, improved torpedo technology, operational innovations that maximize effectiveness. But you suggest these achievements cannot overcome industrial disadvantages that make strategic victory impossible." "The tactical excellence remains significant, Herr Großadmiral," Werner replied, carefully, recognizing the admiral's professional pride and personal investment in submarine warfare doctrine. "But strategic outcomes depend on industrial capacity as much as tactical competence. American production volume transforms the mathematical equations that determine campaign effectiveness." The conversation continued through the afternoon as Dönitz questioned Werner's methodology, challenged his assumptions, and searched for analytical flaws that might invalidate uncomfortable conclusions. But Werner's documentation proved resilient to professional skepticism. The Convoy manifests provided evidence that couldn't be dismissed through institutional preference or ideological certainty. As Werner departed the Reich Chancellery, he understood that his analysis would change nothing about German strategic policy. Dönitz might acknowledge industrial disadvantages privately, might recognize mathematical impossibility of achieving decisive Atlantic victory, but institutional momentum and political reality would prevent fundamental strategy revision. Germany would continue submarine operations because no viable alternatives existed, and admission of strategic failure remained politically unacceptable. The weeks following Werner's briefing with Dönitz brought increasing evidence that his analysis had proven tragically accurate. Intelligence reports throughout December and January documented growing Allied strength in the Atlantic. Extended-range aircraft, escort carriers, improved convoy coordination, tactical innovations that increased U-boat casualties while merchant sinking rates declined. The mathematical trend lines Werner had calculated were manifesting in operational reality that German submarine crews paid for with their lives. Hans's letter arrived on January 28, delivered through the military postal system that maintained connection between frontline units and families enduring war's domestic anxieties. Werner recognized his son's handwriting immediately and felt the familiar mixture of relief and concern that accompanied communication from U-347. The boy was alive, had survived another Atlantic patrol, but each letter might be the last, each communication a fragile connection across waters that claimed German submarines with increasing regularity. The letter's content carried enthusiasm that Werner found both touching and heartbreaking. Hans described successful torpedo attacks, the camaraderie among his crew, and the technical excellence of their Type 7 submarine. The boy wrote with confidence in German capabilities and faith in eventual victory. His words reflected the institutional narratives that sustained military morale, belief in superior training and technological advantage over crude Allied methods. Werner wanted to warn his son that tactical excellence couldn't overcome industrial disadvantages, that American production capacity had already decided the Atlantic campaign's outcome, regardless of individual heroism. But what purpose would such warnings serve except to burden Hans with knowledge that changed nothing about his circumstances or duties? Better that the boy maintain faith in German capabilities, continue fighting with confidence that his sacrifice contributed to achievable objectives. The knock on Werner's door came at 2200 hours on February 3rd. Müller's expression communicated the news before words became necessary. Werner felt time compress into a single moment of devastating clarity, an understanding that transformed his analytical work from abstract mathematics into personal tragedy that would define the remainder of his life. U-347 had been lost with all hands during convoy engagement northwest of the Azores. Allied escort vessels had detected the submarine during the attack approach, had pursued anti-submarine operations with lethal effectiveness that German crews increasingly faced throughout early 1944. Hans and his crewmates had died pursuing tactical objectives that Werner's analysis had proven strategically impossible. Industrial mathematics had claimed his son as surely as depth charges and crushing Atlantic pressure. Werner sat in his darkened office through the night. The convoy manifests still spread across his desk like accusations. He documented American industrial superiority with mathematical precision, had warned senior command that submarine operations pursued unachievable strategic goals. But his analysis had changed nothing about institutional policy or operational reality. Young men continued dying in pursuit of impossible objectives because German command structure lacked courage to acknowledge strategic failure. The spring of 1944 brought operational confirmation of everything Werner's analysis had predicted. May witnessed catastrophic U-boat losses that German submarine command would later call Black May. 41 U-boats were destroyed in a single month, 25% of operational submarines. Allied escort effectiveness, extended air coverage, tactical innovations, all combined with overwhelming industrial capacity to transform the Atlantic from German hunting ground into submarine graveyard. Admiral Dönitz temporarily withdrew U-boats from North Atlantic operations on May 24, admitting what Werner's mathematics had documented 6 months earlier. The submarine campaign had failed to achieve strategic objectives. American industrial capacity had proven decisive despite German tactical excellence and operational sophistication. The Atlantic battle had been decided by factors Werner had identified through careful analysis of convoy manifests that senior command had acknowledged but failed to adequately address. Werner continued his intelligence work through 1944 and into 45, documenting Allied capabilities with professional precision that no longer carried hope of affecting German strategic outcomes. He'd become chronicler of national defeat, mathematical observer recording industrial superiority's inevitable triumph over tactical competence. His analysis had proven accurate in every essential particular, but accuracy provided no satisfaction when validated through mounting casualties and strategic collapse. The war's final months brought personal reckoning with professional choices Werner had made throughout his career. He believed that accurate intelligence provided the foundation for effective strategy, that careful observation of enemy capabilities allowed realistic assessment of German prospects. But the Convoy manifests had taught him that sometimes intelligence revealed truths institutions couldn't acknowledge, strategic realities that political systems couldn't address despite mathematical certainty. Hans's death had transformed abstract analysis into personal tragedy that Werner would carry through whatever remained of his life. His son had died believing in German capabilities Werner's work had proven insufficient. The boy's sacrifice had contributed to tactical achievements that changed nothing about strategic outcomes determined by industrial equations Werner had documented but couldn't alter. As Berlin collapsed around him in April of 1945, Werner understood that his career had documented the mathematics of national defeat. The Convoy manifests had revealed American industrial capacity that transformed warfare's fundamental calculations. But revelation changed nothing about institutional momentum or strategic policies driven by factors beyond mathematical analysis. Germany had continued fighting because alternatives required admissions senior command couldn't make, acknowledgements that challenged ideological certainties supporting the entire regime. Werner survived the war's end, witnessed occupation forces examining his intelligence archives, explaining his analytical work to Allied officers who treated captured documents as historical artifacts rather than strategic assessments. The Convoy manifests that had revealed American industrial superiority became museum pieces, evidence of analytical competence that had proven strategically irrelevant. In the decades following the war, Werner occasionally lectured on intelligence analysis and strategic assessment. He emphasized the importance of mathematical rigor and professional integrity, and stressed that accurate intelligence required courage to present uncomfortable truths, regardless of institutional preferences. But he also acknowledged that sometimes analysis revealed realities systems couldn't address, that perfect intelligence couldn't overcome political constraints or ideological commitments that determined strategic policies. The Convoy manifested from HX 229 remained throughout Werner's life as a reminder of analysis's limitations and tragedy's mathematics. He documented American industrial superiority with scientific precision and had warned that submarine operations pursued impossible objectives. But documentation changed nothing about policies driven by factors beyond rational calculation. Hans and thousands of other young men had died pursuing tactical excellence in service of strategic impossibilities that careful analysis had identified, but institutional systems couldn't acknowledge. Werner's final years brought the opportunity to reflect on a career spent documenting truths institutions preferred to ignore. He believed that accurate intelligence provided the foundation for effective strategy, that mathematical analysis could guide policy toward realistic objectives. But the Convoy manifests taught him that sometimes truth arrived too late or addressed audiences incapable of responding effectively despite perfect understanding. The Atlantic campaign's mathematics had been clear from Werner's first analysis of the captured documents. American industrial capacity exceeded German ability to achieve strategic attrition through submarine warfare. The tonnage equations couldn't be solved in Germany's favor regardless of tactical improvements or operational innovations, but institutional momentum and political reality had prevented strategic adjustment that mathematical analysis recommended. Werner died in 1973, his analytical work recognized by historians as an exemplar of professional intelligence assessment. But personal satisfaction remained elusive, haunted by the memory of son who died pursuing objectives Werner's mathematics had proven impossible. The Convoy manifests had documented strategic reality with scientific precision. But precision changed nothing about political systems that valued ideology over analysis, institutional pride over mathematical truth. The story of Werner Dietrich and the Convoy HX 229 manifests illustrates warfare's transformation during World War II. Industrial capacity became as decisive as tactical excellence, production statistics as important as battlefield courage. American democracy mobilized manufacturing infrastructure that German precision engineering couldn't match, despite theoretical advantages of centralized planning and technical sophistication. The Atlantic campaign's outcome validated Werner's mathematical analysis. By war's end, American shipyards had produced over 2,700 Liberty ships, replacing all merchant tonnage lost since 1939 and expanding Allied maritime capacity beyond pre-war levels. The industrial mobilization Werner had identified through careful manifest analysis proved even more extensive than his conservative estimates suggested. But victory's mathematics provided no comfort for families who'd lost sons to strategic impossibilities that professional analysis had documented but institutions failed to address. Werner's intelligence work represented analytical excellence that proved strategically irrelevant, mathematical accuracy that changed nothing, about policies driven by factors beyond rational calculation. The Convoy manifests remained as historical documents, evidence of intelligence assessment that revealed uncomfortable truths institutional systems couldn't acknowledge. They documented not just American industrial capacity, but limitations of accurate analysis when confronting political reality and ideological certainty. Sometimes perfect intelligence couldn't overcome institutional momentum or challenge assumptions supporting entire regime structures. Werner's legacy reminds us that strategic outcomes depend on factors extending beyond tactical competence or analytical excellence. Industrial capacity, political will, institutional courage to acknowledge uncomfortable truths all contribute to determining warfare's ultimate results. Mathematics can document strategic reality with scientific precision, but mathematics alone cannot force institutions to accept conclusions that challenge comfortable assumptions or threaten established power structures. The Atlantic campaign's tragedy lay not in German analytical failure, but in institutional inability to act on accurate intelligence. Werner documented American industrial superiority with mathematical precision that proved prophetically accurate. But documentation changed nothing about strategic policies, driven by political considerations that transcended rational calculation. Young men died pursuing impossible objectives because systems lacked courage to acknowledge what careful analysis had revealed. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.